Hello, I'm going to try my best to guide you through downward facing dog today. So get ready and I'll see you on the mat. Alright, let's begin on a comfortable seat of your choice. We are working towards downward facing dog today. So today's class might feel more like a workshop style class rather than our usual flowy classes. But I think it's quite important to cover some key points of alignment that I've picked up and I've been taught as well. Know that these alignment points are more like guidelines and you should play around with them and see what works for you. And you might find that to begin with, you need to be building wrist strength first. So maybe coming into more tabletops and planks to build that strength in the forearms and wrists, and then be working on your hamstring length as well. Downward facing dog is an inversion, so we're bringing our heart above our head, and inversions are super fun, so one of my favorite things to go into. And we're literally going upside down. We're strengthening the whole body because we're working against gravity, and we're also given a fresh perspective on life. So when you're new and unfamiliar with inversions, you can feel quite confused. It can feel quite daunting as well. We're resting weight on particular areas of the body what we're not familiar with resting weight on, especially the wrists. So it can be quite scary, but let's work together to make that less scary and less daunting. And hopefully we'll get to a point, or this will plant the seed to get to a point where you will start enjoying inversions and come to love coming into downward facing dog. So confusing point number one of downward facing dog is that there are two rotations in the arms, and that took me a long time to wrap my head round. So hopefully this will explain it better than I've been picking up slowly over the years. Bring your hands shoulders height from the ground out to the sides and start to turn your thumbs down towards the ground and continue to work your hands so they're kind of flipping up towards the sky, not causing too much strain in the shoulders. So this is an internal rotation. So we've brought our biceps from up to round to down, okay? So the triceps have come up, the biceps have come down. Let's flip that so the palms are facing up and let the pinkies continue to go up and the thumbs turn down. So this is an external rotation. So the biceps have come up, the triceps have come down. Both have their own uses. So let's do that again. So let's round our thumb and palm down. Biceps come down, triceps come up, an internal rotation. And then externally rotate it by turning the palm up, continue in this way. Bicep comes up, tricep wraps down. So let's relax that, and you can roll out your shoulders if you want. In downward facing dog, we want an external rotation, external, because with an internal rotation that broadens out the armpits and it digs the shoulder blades in towards the center of the back. And we want the opposite. We want the shoulder blades to be broadened and in line with the pose. And that's how we work optimally here. So if I show you really quickly, I'm going to bring my arms up above my head. Okay, so the arms are in a relatively neutral position. So the upper arms, I'm going to start to internally rotate. And you can see if my armpit space is broadening and my shoulder blades are coming towards each other, and it can cause quite a bit of strain. So let's flip that by coming into an external rotation. And you can see my shoulder blades come in line or broaden and come in line with the rest of my spine. So that's what we want for the upper arms, an external rotation. And the other one we'll cover in a second, but let's come into a tabletop position first. Bringing our shoulders above our wrists and our knees below our hips. Fingers are pointing forwards, and let's roll the shoulders over the wrists in one direction. Relaxing the face and the jaw, breathing in and out through the nose. I'm feeling the weight of the upper body pour into the hands and the fingers. And this is important to start with if you're first working on arm balances and inversions, to really be warming up the wrists. Let's flip that direction. So when I was first doing downward facing dogs, I was causing a lot of strain in my wrist because I just wasn't warming up, or I didn't have the awareness to know that I wasn't warming up my wrists. So if you have a spare few minutes before any class, then I really recommend just taking a moment to pour some weight into the wrists and go from there. Right, let's bring ourselves back through center and bring the fingers so they point out towards the sides of the mat, and shift your shoulders side to side. So from tabletop, we can start to build more wrist strength by coming into plank, which we'll be doing in a second. And then downward facing dog feels like a natural progression from plank. But it all takes time, so be patient. All right, let's bring our fingers so they point towards the knees, and sit the heels or hips back towards the heels. You can curl your back toes under. The heels of your palms can lift up off the ground. We're just coming into the forearms a bit and the wrists. Coming back forwards and then coming back. Go as far as you are more comfortable with. No strain or tightening of the wrists. Let's come back forwards. Okay, let's point the fingers back forwards. So the middle or index finger are pointing towards the front or the top of the mat. And we're going to start to press into all 10 fingers or 10 knuckles, and then the heel of the hand. So we want about 60% of our weight to be taken or distributed along the fingers and knuckles, and then it's the heel of the hands that help support the rest of the weight. And then we want to press a little bit more into the index finger and the thumb side of the hand. So that's the internal rotation of the hands. That's the second point, the confusing point of the two rotations of the arms. So the index finger and thumb side are pressing more into the ground. Bend the elbows, scoop them in so the elbow creases are facing towards each other or towards the top corners of the mat, and that encourages the outer or external rotation of the upper arms. Got that? So it can be really confusing to begin with, but don't worry, it does take time to understand and get the feel for it. Let's start to straighten the right leg behind us and roll it forwards and backwards. And then switch. And we want to be pressing our hands into the ground. So we're pressing away, we're lifting away, and we want the back of the heart, the area between the two shoulder blades, to be lifting up as well. And that will take pressure off the hands ever so subtly. Right, from here, shoulders over wrists. Let's straighten out both legs, coming into our first plank. So you can do this. This is a heavy pose on the wrists. So press your hands away or into the ground and your chest away from the ground, squeezing the thighs towards each other, bringing the belly button to spine, taking deep breaths here. I should say we're rocking forwards and backwards to help continue warm up the back of the legs. And if you need to, definitely lower the knees down to play with the weight here, or even sit back onto the heels and roll out the wrists whenever you need to. So we don't want to be overstraining the wrists and causing injury. Okay, let's come back into our plank. So if you look back, the heels should be over the balls of the feet. The wrists are underneath the shoulders, belly in, lifting the hips a little bit higher than you want them to be. Lifting the back of the chest up towards the sky. Take a deep breath in. As you exhale, bring belly button to spine, bend the knees and try to send the hips up and back towards the sky. So keep your knees bent in this first downward facing dog. Looking forwards, pressing into all 10 fingers and knuckles, more into the index finger, bending the elbows, scooping the elbows in, external rotation, and straighten out the arms, lifting the forearms, loosening out the neck by swaying it side to side, and lifting the hips high up. So the heels don't have to touch the ground. I'd rather you have a lengthened spine and bent knees than a rounded spine and straight legs. And then begin pedaling out the feet. So straighten one leg and pedal out them. Relaxing the face. And keep pedaling for a few more goes. Working some length into the hamstrings. And then keeping the heels lifted or lowering them slowly towards the ground, not touching the ground if they can't. We're going to bring the heels behind or hide the heels behind the toes. So you can't see the heels there. So that's an internal rotation of the legs. On your next inhale, let's ripple forwards, coming back into our plank and lowering the knees down and rolling out the wrists. That was our first downward facing dog, and I'm really feeling it on the hands, and that's me with a lot of practice, and it's just because it is quite a demanding pose. But remember to keep your core tight and lifting, so that reduces some strain on the hands, and we're pressing the hands into the ground as well. Let's come to downward facing dog from a different angle. Let's come to a standing and bend the knees generously forward folding, planting the hands onto the ground. All right, and then we'll begin walking our feet back one step. Should feel okay here. You can keep the knees bent and then walk it back another step. Let's do it again. Keep going back until you start to feel your body is coming into that downward facing dog shape. So this upside down V shape. And you can stop where you're starting to feel a bit uncomfortable and feeling a bit of a shake. And that's okay to stay there. A shortened down dog is always good. And you can even bring your feet as wide as the mat and see how that feels. And even bring your hands a little wider as well, so a wider downward facing dog, and see how that feels. In the widened downward facing dog, we're giving ourselves a little bit of extra space, so it might feel a bit more comfortable, but slowly as we work a downward facing dog, we want to be bringing the hands shoulders distance apart and our feet hips distance apart. But this is a workshop, so we can just play around with seeing what's comfortable with us today. And then maybe looking forwards and then coming back to the front of the mat. Okay, again, maybe lifting up of the hands and rolling out the wrists. And maybe let's try one more. Let's see if we've got time. Yep, we've got one more time to do. Try one more downward facing dog. So let's step the right foot back and then turn the heel down and use the hands to walk them out to the side. So you're in a wide-legged stance here. So bend the knees and press into the three corners of the feet and begin to walk your hands forward, coming into a wide-legged downward facing dog. And then press your hips back and let your chest come down and let your head come between your shoulders or arms. Still pressing into all 10 fingertips and knuckles, wrapping the triceps in, biceps up. And this has a different feeling or effect on the body as well, this wide-legged forward fold. A more calming effect. I think more weight is on the heels, so there's less strain on the hands. Take one more breath here. Walk your hands back. Then heel toe, the feet together, lowering the knees down and coming into a seat. 15 minutes really doesn't give enough time to cover all the down dogs that you can do, but I really encourage you to play around with the weight of your body and getting familiar with downward facing dog, as if you want to continue a practice, you'll most likely come across it more and more. But take it easy and really remember to roll out the wrists as well. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Namaste.